Hello everybody and welcome to the Mojo Book Nook, where we talk about books that are made into movies, and thank you for joining us again today. How are you today?
I am very well today, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing very well as well. We were doing Cujo last time, which is a fantastic book, and thank you to everybody who tuned in, and thank you for subscribing and liking and sharing as well. Today, we're going to do something a little bit different, right?
A little bit, yeah.
I'm a person who is into extreme horror and gore. I like writing like that. I like movies like that. What do you feel about that?
I like horror. The blood and gore is fine with me. I like suspense, which this one has a little of both.
Now, on our bookshelf here, we picked a book today that is a combination of a bunch of different authors. It covers the visceral side of human nature. It goes into the deep, dark corners of your mind. It makes you explore things that you would sometimes confront, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely, and I think a lot of times people don't want to admit that little dark shadow in the back of their mind, that little dark corner is even there. They try to force it down and ignore it, and they don't want to be reminded that there is a very, very dark side to humanity.
There's certain books, certain things that explore the taboos.
Yes.
The visceral, the dark, the yin and yang. How can you even describe it? It's the things that people don't want to confront.
It's the shadow.
Yeah,
It's
dark.
the shadow. Everyone has a shadow.
Yes.
Some people confront their shadow, some people live in their shadow, and some people try to just force it into a closet and pretend that it's not there with the rest of the skeletons.
It takes the mask off the people.
Exactly, and some of us wear many masks.
Yes, exactly.
You have your professional mask that you wear when you're at work. You have your mask that you wear with extended family, the relatives that come to visit twice a year. You have the mask that you wear with your immediate family, the people that you live with. They see a side of you that no one else sees. We wear different masks.
And this book that I've chosen today is a favorite of mine. I found this book back on the shelves in 1992. It had already been out for 2 years. And when it comes to gore and hardcore writing, stuff like that doesn't bother me. So the book I'm going to talk about today off our bookshelf is SplatterPunks by Paul M. Salmon.
Now, is splatterpunk a genre itself, or would explain to us what the term splatterpunk means?
That's a very good question. Now, splatterpunk, the way it's defined is an author who goes and pushes the limits. It's a genre all in itself. It's the grisly, the gory, the taboo, that little part of, if I could only get away with it. People, if I could only get away with it. Well, you never will, you know what I mean?
Yeah, like the saying, it's only illegal if you get caught.
Well, yeah.
And how many people are in prison because they thought, I won't get caught?
The stories in this book are taken from some incredible authors. Now, splatterpunk authors are people who push the boundaries when they do their writing. In this book, you're going to find chapters that deal with incest. Splatterpunks don't bow to any god. They don't see anything as pushing the limits too far. If you're into post-apocalyptic situations where people are trying to survive, and there's cannibalistic situations out of that, one of the authors, Ray Garton in here, wrote a story that was called, wrote a novel, Crucifix Autumn, because the one chapter 18 that was in the original novel was too graphic to publish. It's in this book, the uncensored chapter. Because it got taken out, he changed the book to Crucifix and left the autumn part out of it. It will challenge your way of thinking when it comes to religious dogma. There's a lot of taboo about the subject matter of that one chapter. I'm not going to wreck it for you. You have to read it yourself. The gentleman Ray Garton, he also wrote another famous book that we'll be covering later on that was turned into a movie, which was The Haunting in Connecticut.
Yes.
So he is a very popular author in this book. Another one of my favorite stories in this book is a post-apocalyptic story that happens in Los Angeles. It's called City of Angels by a new author at the time. When this came out in 1990, his name was J.S. Russell. This is that cannibalistic How do you survive when everything goes down? Extremely, extremely grisly. It's cannibalistic, it's orgy. If you're not into the visceral, you're not going to enjoy this book. I read this book before I go to bed. That's when I read this book. You understand.
And I have to say, I haven't had a chance to finish this book. I started reading it, but of course life gets in the way, right?
But we both read the beautiful story in this book. And the reason why we picked this book is because of
The Midnight Meat Train.
Yes!
A classic, a beautifully done movie.
Oh, the movie was
Stayed
insane.
so true to the story. It was a short story published by Clive Barker in 1984.
And you'll know Clive Barker because he wrote his first 3 volumes, The Books of Blood, in 1984, and then just burst onto the circuit after that. A lot of his books, Hellraiser, Nightbreed, Midnight Meat Train, which is in this book. Explain to him a little bit about the actual story of the Midnight Meat Train.
The story of the Midnight Meat Train focuses on what's under the surface. Because when you look at it from a psychological standpoint, is it better to sacrifice a few to save the many, which is sort of an ethical dilemma. Hidden things that people have to live with, but they try not to think about.
That's right.
It sort of draws from ancient cultures, from modern fears and taboos.
Yeah.
It's actually a very well-rounded story considering the subject matter and the fact that it's a real blood and gore story and a hardcore blood and gore movie.
When the man himself, Clive Barker, ended up writing the story, it was like a poke in the eye to the New York myths about the subway system. What happens on the subway systems in New York.
And the alligators in the sewer.
Yes.
Because everybody knows that if you live in New York, you gotta have a baby alligator.
Yeah.
Well, eventually, alligator eats the cat, flush alligator down the toilet, where does he go? He lives in the sewer and becomes this radioactive, eating, mutated, giant sewer monster.
Yeah.
And you never quite know what's going to happen when you go down there. It's hidden. It's underneath.
The underground world, that seedy, dirty, smelly, damp, dark, that
Exactly.
we don't really know what happens after hours now. Clive Barker was so smart that when he wrote the book, they swear he must have had some kind of medical text like Grey's Anatomy and had a dog ear, because when he was describing the visceral parts in the actual story, it was pretty close to being medical when it came to parts and what was oozing. And
They show things in this movie that I've never seen in movies, and I'll tell you, I've watched some pretty crazy movies. Yeah, so don't let your kids watch Midnight Meat Train.
No, don't watch Midnight Meat Train.
Unless they're over 18, because you really don't want to deal with the nightmares.
It's pretty... Okay, before we even get into that, let's just talk about what you thought about the book and the Midnight Meat Train.
It's visceral, it's gory, but it makes you think.
Yeah.
It tackles some taboos. It draws from the concept of sacrificing people to the gods.
For the greater
Or
good,
happy,
so that they don't
keeps
come
them at
up.
bay. They don't come up, they don't attack people. A lot of psychological, a lot of subliminal, and the other stories that I've actually had a chance to read in this book, they all tend to be very much like that. There's the blood, there's the gore, but there's also that undercurrent of just humanality, the tension of the human condition.
And that's what makes this book so neat, because it makes you confront some really dark places in yourself. Too.
Exactly. But if you take the time to actually absorb what you're reading and really think about it and really put it into context, into the way our society is now, on the surface it's very shallow, but if you give it the opportunity, it can be very deep.
Now, Paul S. Salmon is a gentleman who also was working with RoboCop, RoboCop 2, the originals back in the 80s, and a classic, Dune, the movie Dune. The gentleman who put this book together and edited it with all the incredible authors in this book. Well, let's talk about the rating for a sec.
Good rating is out of 5 black cats.
And a bad rating is out of 5 hairballs. If you had a chance reading what you did and just talking about Midnight Meat Train, what would you give SplatterPunks.
Given that it's short stories, there's not a lot of space or time to flesh the stories out. They pack a big punch in a very small package.
Yeah.
Given the caliber of the authors in this collection, I would give this a good solid 4 black cats.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. 4 black cats. This is
a good
incredible.
solid 4.
Yeah.
It takes more to affect us that way.
It does now.
I mean, you mentioned Jekyll and Hyde.
Mm-hmm.
When Stevenson wrote Jekyll and Hyde, his wife read the first manuscript and was so horrified by it that she threw it in the fireplace and burnt it, and he had to rewrite the book.
Yeah, exactly. The main character in this, Mahogany, he has a really hard kind of decision to make. Now we're going to talk about the movie.
We're going to talk about the movie, The Midnight Meat Train.
Midnight Meat Train.
The 2 main characters in The Midnight Meat Train are Leon, played by Bradley Cooper, and Mahogany, played by Vinnie Jones. You can look at Mahogany as, is he a villain or is he a hero? Mahogany's job is to ride the last train in the New York subway system and then murder the people on the train.
That's right.
In order to feed the reptilian creatures who live in the subway system, which prevents them from coming out and attacking people and just running amok and murdering everybody in New York City, basically.
Yeah.
So you're looking at that paradox of, say, sacrifice a few to save the many, and is that really something that most people are prepared to do? So is Mahogany a villain for murdering these people, or is Mahogany a hero for saving everyone that the reptilians don't attack? Poor Leon, he's a photographer.
Yeah.
He's living in New York City, wants to make it big, wants to have his work shown in a gallery, goes to an opening, the owner of the gallery says, give me something better.
Yeah.
So off he goes in search of something better, and he happens upon Mahogany with his little bag of tricks.
Yes, his little bag.
And follows him into the subway, and man, he gets in over his head.
Leon has a choice to make as well, and that's another dilemma that weighs heavy as well. But when you're put in the situation that he is, what would you do in that situation?
Because, spoiler alert, when you come to the end of the Midnight Meat Train, Leon takes Mahogany's place.
Yeah.
There's a brutal battle to the death in the subway, and Leon wins.
That's right.
Or
did he really win?
Exactly. Did he really win? Now he becomes the butcher. This movie had a budget of $15 million. Its opening weekend in the States, it made $34,000. Box office gross worldwide by the time it finished in theaters was only $3.5 million. So they took a massive hit. The movie did not get the publicity that it deserved. In the UK, it came out on Halloween. Yes.
Because we saw the movie, it's mostly shot on the subway car. It's not like it had a...
It's one of those movies that it builds the suspense because you don't have to pay attention to everything else that's going on. You're in an art gallery, you're in an apartment, you're on the subway.
You're on the subway.
You've got 3 main settings.
There
are 2 main characters. And then there's Brooke Shields, of course, who plays
the art
gallery person who sent him out to get a better photo. His work wasn't good enough, give me something better, and we all know how that ended.
We've covered the book. What would you give the movie itself, Midnight Meat Train?
So given the fact that they lost massive amounts of money on this movie, I've watched it a number of times.
Yeah, so have I.
And I actually own a copy of it. I would say, as far as expanding on what the original story was.
Yes.
The special effects. Yeah. The reality of the bodies. You see the bodies hanging. People are still alive, and the bodies are swinging. It's like going through a slaughterhouse with the sides of beef. It's all very real looking, even though it's only a movie and these aren't really dead bodies hanging up here, but it's very real looking. The sound of the blood spattering and
the organs.
I would give the movie 4.5.
Woo!
4.5 black cats, just because I gave the story 4. The movie really expands on the story. To me personally, I thought it was a fantastic movie, but like I said, it's the shock, the horror, the blood and gore in your face, and I mean in your face, blood and gore.
I love the movie. The actual short story in the book and the movie are so close together. I'm going to give it 5 black cats for the Midnight Meat Train. The gore I wanted was in it. Vinnie Jones, he's just an unassuming, weird-looking figure as it is with this face. And to look at the change in him when the bodies are swinging, it's not a Leatherface Texas Chainsaw kind of thing. He's so cold.
Very
and
cold,
calculated.
very stone-faced, no emotion. It's his
It's
job.
desensitized.
Exactly, and it's his job. He goes in, he does his job.
And then goes home.
And then goes home.
It's like punching in a card with the Flintstones, and then he slides down the dinosaur, gets in the car, and away he goes, and back to work the next day. And the tension in Bradley Cooper, seeing all these things that are happening, going, what the heck is going on here?
When you see the reptilian creatures
Yeah.
coming onto the subway car, and the conductor is saying, step away from the meat. Oh,
Now I get it.
You can see it too on Leon's face. When it's dawning on him that this is not just a serial killer. This man is doing his job, and he's protecting people, providing a means for these reptilian creatures to survive and eat without having to come out and attack
that's right.
people. That ethical dilemma. Do you
What would
sacrifice
happen?
the few to save the many?
And here's a good question for you. If you were put in that situation, what would you do? Leave us a comment in the sections down below there. That'd be really neat too, just to find out what you think. And if you agree on what Darlene and I have given this book, which is a great book, SplatterPunks, unbelievable book, and then
And on the movie, The Midnight Meat Train.
Yeah, and have yourself a smiley, happy day. Thank you again for doing this with me.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you.
Okay, bye for now. Another one of my favorite stories in this book is a post-apocalyptic one.
And it's his job to murder. He's stuck in that position. Kind of like the Santa Claus. Santa falls off the roof. Now you're the big guy. Like it or not, you played a dangerous game of tag, and now you're it.
Oh man, now that's a total juxtaposition from one end to the other. Holy cow!
So if you haven't already subscribed to our channel, please do so. Hit that little bell notification and share with your friends. Share, share, share.
Yes, please, and have yourself a smiley, happy day. Bye for now.